Okay, so today we're going to be talking about how to solve and graph inequalities. Solving inequalities is the same as solving equations. Instead of an equal sign, we have our inequality sign. So at the top of your paper, I want you to go ahead and write down that this sign means greater than, because whatever number is on this side is bigger. The alligator always eats the bigger number. This sign is the less than sign because it's facing away from the number. It's less than. This sign is the greater than, but it has a line underneath. This line means equal to. So you say greater than or equal to. This sign means less than or equal to. So make sure you have that at the top of your paper. All right, so now let's look at 1. The first step to solving inequalities is using the same steps as equations. So we look for distributive property first, then we combine like terms, then we collect variables on one side and constants on the other, and then we perform the inverse operations. So let's do that first step first. So we set up our railroad tracks. But here, we do not have an equal sign. Instead, we have an inequality sign. So instead of drawing our equal sign, we're just going to bring down our inequality sign right here. So now, I don't have any distributive property on this side or like terms. So this side is done. Let's go to this side. I don't have any distributive property or like terms here. So I have simplified this side as much as I could. So now we are ready to collect variables. So I'm going to make this side constants and this side variables. So label your tops. Now, let's look here. Who doesn't belong? The -3. So I need to move it over to the other side. And how I do that is I add. I do the opposite sign. And whatever you do to one side, you do to the other. So now, -1 plus 3 is going to be 2 because integer rules. Different signs, we subtract and use the sign of the bigger number. Now I can bring down my 4x. So I've collected my constants on one side and my variables on the other. So now I'm ready to do my inverse operations. So how am I going to get, and I'm bringing my x alone. Correct, we're going to divide because we are multiplying here, and the inverse operation of multiplying is dividing. And whatever you do to one side, you do to the other. Now, we did not divide by a negative number here, so our inequality sign stays the same, and we just bring it down. Now, 4 over 4 cancels out, and all that is left is x. So there's our x. Now here we have a fraction, 2 over 4. That can be simplified to 1/2. So we have officially gotten our variable alone. So now, step 3 says graphing reminder. So we need to graph this inequality. So right here, I have labeled my number line. I put -1 here, I put 0 here, I put 1/2 here, 1, 2, 3. So I've set up my number line. Now I need to plot this. And how we do this is whenever you have a greater than or equal to or less than or equal to sign, you always have a closed circle. So you find 1/2 and you put a closed shaded in circle because it's a greater than or less than sign. It has that line below it. Now, we need to understand what this is saying. This is saying 1/2 is less than x. So how we show that 1/2 is less than x, we have our shaded in circle, and less than goes in the left direction, so we're going to draw an arrow to the left because it's showing that 1/2 is less than x. All right, let's go to number 2 and set up this problem. The first step we do is draw our railroad tracks. But instead of putting our equal sign here, we put our inequality sign. So bring it straight down, just like that. So now, we look here. Do we have any like terms or distributive property? No. So we can go over here. Do we have distributive property? No. Do we have like terms? No. So now we're ready to collect our variables. So I'm going to put my variables over here and my constants over here. So starting here, I need to move over my 12 because that is not a variable. So how I do that is I subtract 12. And whatever you do to one side, you do to the other. And I bring down my negative x. So now we need to calculate what negative 15 and negative 12 is. They're the same signs, so we add and keep, which it will be negative 27. Now, we have a negative variable. Remember, we talked about this earlier this week. When we have a negative variable, we have to make it positive. So how we do that is we can multiply or divide by a negative 1. And whatever we do to one side, we do to the other. But this is where it gets different. We just multiplied by a negative number. And up here, it says when we multiply both sides by a negative number, we reverse the inequality sign. So now this turns into a positive x, and this inequality now turns in from a greater than or less than sign, greater than or equal to sign, to a less than or equal to sign. So it flips. Do you see that? Whenever you multiply or divide by a negative number to both sides, your inequality sign will flip. And this becomes negative 27 times negative 1 becomes positive 27. So now we have solved. The last step is we graph. So we have a less than or equal to sign. So we're going to have a shaded in, a closed circle. But before we put our closed circle, we need to label our number line. So let's say 27 will be here, and all the numbers less than that are 26, 25, 24, 23, 22, and here is 28, 29, 30, 31. So this is what your number line should look like. Now, your closed circle, because it's a less than or equal to sign, is going to go above that 27, shaded in. And we know that this is saying x is less than or equal to 27. So our arrow, since it's less than or equal to, it's going to go in this direction because this shows that it's less than or equal to the 27. It does not go above it. All right, so I want you to pause this video and try number 3 and 4 on your own. All right, so we are back. The answer you should have gotten is 8 is greater than or equal to x. So let's talk about this. So the first step that we do is look for distributive property on this side. Do we have any? No. On this side, we look for it. We do not. Then we ask, do we have like terms on each side? No. So now we can go ahead and move our constants to one side and our variables to the other. So here's your constant, and here's my variable. So I moved over the 5 by adding 5, and I got 2. And I brought down my inequality sign, which is the greater than or equal to sign, and I brought down 1/4 x. Now we need to get x alone. We've moved our variables over to one side and our constants to the other. So in order to get our variable alone, what do we need to do? What is that special thing that we've talked about that we do when we're multiplying by a fraction? Correct. We multiply by its reciprocal, which means we flip 1/4 to 4/1. And whatever we do to one side, we do to the other. So here I flipped over 4 over 1 and brought it. So now you do 4 times 2, which is 8. And you bring down your inequality sign, x. Have we gotten x alone? Correct. So we have found our answer. Now to graph it. I set up my number line. I put all my less numbers lower than 8 on the left side and all my numbers greater than 8 on the right side. So this is a greater than or equal to. It has a line underneath, so I know my circle is going to be shaded and it's going to be above the 8 because that's the number we're working with. Now, it says that 8 is greater than, because it's eating the bigger number, it's eating the 8, so it's saying 8 is greater than x. So our arrow is going to go to the right to show that it is greater than. All right, let's move to number 4, which you did. All right, your answer that you should have gotten is x is greater than 25. So the first thing we do is look at this side of the inequality sign. Do we have any distributive property? No. So now we ask ourselves, do we have any like terms? Yes, 6x and negative x. When you combine those, you get 5x. And then you bring down your 30, negative 30, and then you bring down your inequality sign and your 95. Now, we've simplified as much as we could. We did our distributive property and we combined like terms. So now we're ready to set up our railroad tracks and solve. So we set up our railroad tracks and we bring down our inequality sign. So I first label this side as variables and this side as constants. So let's look here. Who doesn't belong? The 30. So we need to move it over. And in order to move it over, we have to add, do the opposite of the negative, which is positive. So add 30. When you add 95 plus 30, you get 125. And then you bring down your 5x. Now, we've officially gotten our variables on one side and our constants on the other. So now we need to get x all alone. And how we do that is we do the inverse operation. If we're multiplying here, what's the inverse? Dividing. And we're dividing by a positive number, so our inequality sign does not need to switch. And whatever we do to one side, we do to the other. So 125 divided by 5, and that's 25. So x is greater than 25. So now let's look to see how we can graph this. All right. So I've labeled it 25 in the center, and I've done all the numbers less than that and all the numbers greater than that. So now I have a greater than sign here, but it does not have a line underneath. So therefore, my circle is not shaded. It is open. It's called an open circle. But this is saying that x is greater than 25. So we're going to show our arrow going to the right to show that it is greater than, because when you're moving to the right, you are increasing. Awesome. So go ahead and pause this video and try number 5 and 6 on your own. Okay, so we are back. Let's look at number 5. Your answer that you should have gotten is x is less than negative 3. So first what we do is we look on this side of the inequality sign. We need to distribute. So we distribute, and we got negative 8x minus 6, and then we bring down our negative 18, and then we bring down our inequality sign, negative 48. Then on this side, we also notice that we can combine like terms, negative 6 and negative 18, which becomes negative 24. And we bring down our negative 8x, and we bring down our inequality sign, and then we bring down negative 48. Then we choose our side to bring variables here and constants over here. So I moved my constants over to this side, and I moved my variables over to this side. And I got negative 8x, our greater than sign, 24, and then we need to get x alone. So we need to divide by negative 8. If you notice, we divided both sides by a negative number. So my inequality sign switched.